I used to try to rush through those moments to get to the good stuff, to get
Mm.
past the have tos so I could get to the want tos. If we try to rush through that to get to the quote unquote good stuff, we're rushing through the majority of our life, not being present in it, not seeking out the joy and the jet lag, not experiencing it with our five senses activated, total presence, and just being in the moment.
Hello, everyone. I'm your host, Dr. Shafer of Talks with Dr. Shafer. I'm so glad you're here. I'm a physician, mom, life coach, musician, author, publisher, and I'm passionate about using storytelling to help you reclaim your story so that you can build your most beautiful future. Now, as you may notice, I'm dressed a bit more casually for this episode because let's face it, here in northern Michigan, it's still snowy and frozen, but spring sun is starting to tease us a bit. And we are all dreaming of faraway and often warmer lands to visit and explore. Our guest today helps us prepare to embrace a traveler's mindset for our adventures, as well as hold on to that way of thinking to incorporate the best parts of vacation into how we're living our daily lives. Kat Medina is the author of The Joys of Jet Lag and is empowering others by promoting a traveler's mindset to create more joy and adventure in daily life. Kat, thank you so much for being with us on the show today and inspiring us to have a traveler's mindset.
Thanks so much for the opportunity. I'm really excited about it.
Me too. And I believe you're also from a part of the world that stays snowy longer than most. Am I right?
That's right. I live in South Lake Tahoe, California, and it's been kind of a dry winter, but we're supposed to get our first big storm tomorrow. So I'm actually looking forward to it.
Oh, that's nice. Well, and it's good when you're able to embrace that. And really, that is what the message that you are conveying is all about, really embracing the realities and potentially challenges of where you are and enjoying them, whether it's your home or where you are traveling. Now, you started traveling at a really young age. How has international travel and domestic travel inspired you on your life journey?
I feel like for most of my life, I've been two different people. I've
Mm.
traveled to about 40 countries and lived in Ecuador, Argentina, France, and Spain. And I noticed that when I traveled, I was my best self.
Mm.
Joy felt effortless. And then when I'd return home, it felt elusive or forced, even. I try to control the uncontrollable, get frustrated when things didn't go as planned, and probably worst off, I stopped appreciating the little things like clean drinking water or a hot shower, even though I knew firsthand from so many places I'd been and so many parts of the world that those things weren't readily available. And so I'd focus on my next trip when I could feel fully alive again and like I was living my best self. And one day I realized that as much as I prioritized traveling, I still spent most of my time at home, working, going through the motions. And it felt like such a waste of time to spend my days wishing I was somewhere else instead of enjoying where I was. So, a couple of years ago, I made it my mission to bridge the gap between who I was when I traveled and who I was at home. And I realized that it all came down to mindset, a traveler's mindset. And by embodying a traveler's mindset in daily life, I was able to feel the joy that I craved no matter where I was. And that kind of prompted me to write about it in hopes of providing people with simple but impactful strategies that they could use in their life to experience more joy and adventure on the day to day instead of just when they're on vacation, considering so many of us in the United States only get a couple of weeks of vacation each year.
Hmm. Right. Oh, I think that's so inspiring because when we are on vacation and those inevitable challenges come up, we have to learn to go with the flow. We have to step outside of what can sometimes be a rigid schedule. And so, how do you find actionable ways to help others and things that you incorporated into your routines at home to help you lean into that more flexible approach and really meaningfully change your mindset?
Um, One of the big differences that I noticed when I was traveling versus at home is that when I was abroad, I kind of went about my days with this attitude of adventure. And everyone knows that when you travel, things go wrong, things don't go
Hmm.
as planned. And it's kind of like maybe it's the expectation that something unexpected is going to happen. So you're more likely to go with the flow of it. But it basically bringing that home where you can adapt and participate in the moment, whatever ways it's asking you to show up with an open heart and with this attitude of adventure and trying to see the humor in the mishaps, seeing that you can speed up the time difference between tragedy and comedy if you have the right mindset
Hmm.
with it. And I mean, when we travel and something goes wrong, generally that's the story that we tell when we get home to our family and friends. So, how can we bring that back home knowing that a lot of life also falls short of expectations? So, I think one
Hmm.
of the things is what I like to call participating in the moment. And that's basically saying yes, not yes to every opportunity or offer, but showing up fully with this attitude of adventure and trying to participate in the moment full out in the best way you can instead of resisting it. I think that's the key.
That's wonderful. I love this idea of expecting the unexpected. We know that the only thing that's really guaranteed in life is that life will change and that we will have challenges. And this perfect picture of life, it's not really attainable. It never was. It might be sold to us to buy a product or work hard so we get that house or whatever. But at the end of the day, it's actually those moments where we face those challenges and we were flexible and resilient that actually we take home those lessons. We have the most fun experiences. It makes me think of so a dear friend of mine who passed away a few years ago when she had cancer, and one of the things that she was doing in the final year of her life was spending time with friends. And I recall we were sitting around a table on her patio with dear friends that she had traveled to Ireland with. And I just love telling this story because, she had known this couple for decades. They knew each other really, really well, had traveled together, had spent so much time. She and her friend spoke on the phone every single day. And she and I spoke on the phone most days too. And even though they had so many experiences to recall, the experience that we were just laughing and crying and connecting over, and I won't ever forget this moment, was that when they traveled to Ireland, they had brought a US, I think it was a toaster they'd brought and were trying to use there, which toasters are kind of problematic even in your own electrical outlet where it's meant to be used.
Yeah.
But they were using it in a European outlet. And the person who was using it was a guest and was also this dear friend, and he was a chef, right? He knew what he was doing with these equipments, but it caught fire.
Oh gosh.
And everyone was just kind of screaming and trying to find out what to do. And then they were also laughing and they were trying to get it out of this beautiful castle that they were in because they didn't want to burn down the castle. And they were throwing things on it and they get the fire out. And like the whole dinner was also ruined that this chef had made. And it was one of the funniest stories that I've ever heard. And the most, impactful moment for me was actually the joy everyone was experiencing telling this story that was ridiculous and funny and unexpected, ruined the day, ruined the meal, but actually made it so much merrier and a more connecting experience through this shared tragedy that they averted through their quick action.
Yeah.
So it just makes me think, they had so many shared experiences that didn't happen when they travel. I'm sure they'd faced many things together, but it was this travel experience that really left its mark, that they had to adapt to, but that really made them connect. And even at the end of her life was something she was leaning into and loving sharing that with even more people.
Yeah. Yeah. exactly.
What kind of experiences have you had in your travel where in the moment, especially early on in travel when you weren't really expecting the unexpected, that just threw everything off and then you looked back and you thought, gosh, I'm kind of glad that happened because it's really a treasured experience for me now.
That's a great question. So, what comes to mind is about 10 years ago, I moved to Ecuador for several months. And when I went and arrived, I had some issues with my visa, and I didn't speak much Spanish at the time. And uh, I got through, arrived, everything after some complications right at the airport. And when after a couple of months that I was there, I left the country to meet up with some friends and family in Peru to hike the Inca Trail and see Machu Picchu. And with those reservations, I had to make them like a year in advance, and they were super strict on the day and time. And family and friends were flying in, and we would all meet in Cusco. And so I get to the airport, and the official was asking me for my censo, and I had no idea what that was. And I had already checked in my luggage and checked into the flight, and they wouldn't let me pass because I didn't have this document that apparently I was supposed to get when I first arrived into the country during that confusion. And they said I wouldn't be able to board the plane without it. And they gave me an address to this office in downtown Quito where I would be able to get this document expedited. But at the time, I had maybe like an hour and a half until my flight left. And they basically looked at me and were just like, good luck. It's probably not going to happen. And I was like, my
Mm.
luggage is already through. What happens to that? And they're like, I don't know. Just go try. And at the time, this was years ago, there was an issue with express kidnappings where taxi drivers or fake taxi drivers would kind of temporarily kidnap you for about 24 hours, taking you to all these different ATMs to drain your accounts, and then they'd let you go. So I guess, probably one of the better kinds of kidnappings, really. But the advice was to always call and prearrange a taxi from a trusted company. Never just hop into a cab on the street, or especially not at the airport. But I didn't have the luxury of time. And so I ran out there, got in the first cab that I could find, kind of explained the situation. My Spanish was a bit better at this point, and hope for the best. And when I told him, I was like, I have an hour and a half until my flight. I need this document. And he just was kind of like, well, let's try. And so we drove to the office, and they weren't open yet, but there was already a massive line of people outside. And the taxi driver was so kind. He got out and went and asked the guard if he could ask for some information about what we might need in order to get this processed, and explain the situation. And apparently, I needed a color photocopy of my passport, and to print out a couple documents. And so he told me this, and there was a place next door that you could like make photocopies, but it was closed as well. And so he's like, I'm sorry, I'm going to go do a couple runs. And if I can, I'll try to come back and pick you up. But you need these photocopies in order to do this. But the place isn't open. So good luck. And I was like, okay, no problem. Like, you've already done more than enough. I stand at the back of the line, and I just kind of am like, what am I going to do? I don't know what to do. And I was trying to figure out how I'm going to get in contact with family and friends. And then I see the taxista running back to me, going, come on, vamos, vamos. And like, I found a coffee place that was open. And so I chase after him with my backpack, and we run like 2 blocks, get to the copy shop and make the copies, run back. It's right as the doors are opening to this office building. And like, he was able to talk to the guard and let us go in first just as they opened. and helped me to get everything processed in like record times. Like if you think of like the timing it takes for something, it's like the DMV times 1,000 for Ecuador. But we got it done, got in the car, and the driving in Ecuador can be a little bit scary and crazy. And it used to make me nervous. But on that drive back to the airport, I was like, let's go. Like, and we get there 40 minutes before the flight is supposed to leave. And I was just so grateful to the taxista. And he was just like, it's my pleasure. It's what I do. And anyway, I don't even know his name, but he had such an impact with his kindness and going above and beyond that, like, I think back on that moment often of like how rare it is that a person would do that, go above and beyond and make that investment in a total stranger. And as a result, it completely made my trip happen. Like otherwise I wouldn't have been able to do it without him. That's for certain.
I love this reflection on it because at the end of the day, I think on one hand, we think, gosh, this never happens, right? Who would do that? But then when we look back at our lives, so many pivotal moments were because someone leaned in and helped us and gave a helping hand when we needed it. And when we were brave enough to ask for that help, right? It requires both of those things. And I think that's such a wonderful story to share to inspire people. Ask. It's no until you ask for sure. It could still be no, but you need to ask and try. And it's funny because anymore, and I imagine you experience this as well, and following your Instagram, I've seen you in real time experience it. Anymore, it's so common to have a flight be canceled or delayed, and you may need to be the person that gets off of the plane first, even though you're in the back, or you may need some special assistance. And if you are too shy or feeling that you don't deserve to ask for that help, you won't get it. But what I have seen in travel that I think is really fascinating in recent trips and years is that as travel has become more complicated, there are more delays, more cancellations, even flight crews needing to rest because they're overbooked. That's happened to me many times recently, and it never would have happened 10 years ago that I had experienced, right? Just changes in air travel that are affecting us all. And you'd think that then we'd become numb and we'd kind of be like, well, everyone's got problems. We're all delayed, we're all have these troubles. But I actually see the opposite. I see because we're all experiencing it. We're all getting used to the fact that, some days we're under more stress to get somewhere than others, or we have a tighter connection or what have you. People are really working together to stay calm and to help. Like, okay, we're going to stay seated and we're going to let the people who need to run. We're going to get their luggage out for them. Or, you know what, I'm going to give up my seat because my travel plans really aren't urgent, but you need to get to this funeral or this meeting, and I get it. And countless times when I'm on a delayed flight, and you think people would be agitated, and you get on the plane and everyone's honestly just in a good mood and they're so grateful because, hey, we're going. We're gonna get there. They're gonna figure this out for us. And I love that. And so I see this collective response to air travel, despite it seeming like it's getting more challenging, that people are becoming more flexible. Are you experiencing that? And if so, what do you, as a travel expert, what do you attribute that to?
I have been seeing that. I'm not certain what I attribute it to. I feel like it's like you said, people, I really feel like deep down, that's what lights people up is being able to genuinely help others and express kindness. And oftentimes in travel, it can either bring out the worst in us or bring out the best in us. But usually, like as long as like something is not going terribly wrong, it tends to bring out the best in us and bring forth our compassion and empathy. And we realize that I don't know if it is possible to help, we can. Maybe it's that attitude of adventure coming into play, but I really think that that's something that doesn't show up a lot in our daily lives because we get stuck in our routines and The little dramas that make up the day to day can feel incredibly urgent and important.
Mm.
And it kind of unintentionally places us into a state of rigidity. And when we get in that state, we're less likely to, you know, choose others before us. But when we travel, I feel like we naturally tap into that sometimes.
And when we are having that challenge, is there a way for us to have a mantra or a response to, okay, I'm feeling that old, not again, I'm traveling. How can I reframe this as an opportunity and lean into being flexible? Is there a mantra or a practice that we can have at the ready that we've prepared for in calm times so that when we're traveling and under that stress, we know the rhythm to jump into?
I find it helpful to ask myself a question. And what I like to ask when I can remember, if everything's starting to hit the fan, is how can I be gratefully conscious that life is happening for me right now? And I think that, questions really help us focus. And if we ask the right questions, we can change our focus. And what we focus on is what we see more of. So if
Mm.
you ask the right question that's rooted in, like, oh, this is happening for me, I just may not be able to see it yet. A lot of times, you know, we end up finding out at the end of our lives, when we're on our deathbed, that all these little situations, these problems, these unexpected circumstances that seemed really awful at the time, if you continue watching, the movie of your life play out, you see how they were necessary to happen to lead you to, a relationship that you cherish, a job that you wanted, an important move or a decision that you made. It's all kind of connected, and you can't have just obviously good stuff. Otherwise, life would be pretty boring and we wouldn't learn much. And I do think that we're here to learn and grow and, become better and love and connect. And you need those mishaps to be able to do that. And so if you ask yourself that question, how can I be gratefully conscious that life is happening for me right now? You can hopefully see how it is happening for you, before you're on your deathbed, which is a
Mm.
whole lot more enjoyable.
When you discuss this, I like to visualize things. It's just the way my brain works as I'm listening to these concepts. And what I was seeing, imagining was the mishaps of life being like the glue, right? They're not the thing we're chasing, they're not the goal, they're not the relationship, but they're the glue that solidified the relationship into our life, right? We met this person, we ended up pursuing this field. We ended up studying this because we were intrigued by this experience we had in the setting of a stressor. And that stressor, that challenge acted like a glue to really solidify it into the fiber of who we have become as a person. And that really helps to reframe those challenges as a very necessary, integral piece of becoming who we are on this journey.
Mhm. Yes, I completely agree. And I think it's important that when we experience these challenges, like, you need to give yourself a chance to acknowledge and validate the pain and suffering that it's causing without jumping right into,
Mm.
it's I'm not talking about toxic positivity when I bring
Yeah.
this up. It's more just like a macro perspective of your life. But it is important to feel that and acknowledge it, because I do think these challenges are kind of like the root or the seed to the human experience of connection. So if
Mm.
you just bypass and be like, everything's fine, then you miss out on a chance of experiencing hardship, which is really what makes us fully understand empathy. And we have to experience the bad to recognize what other people are experiencing and how to react to that.
Yeah, because everything's fine is surface level.
Mm.
And man, this is getting real. Turning to the person next to you, man, this is getting real. And getting real with them and sharing that moment. That's when we get to those deep connections. Looking back on your vast experience of travel and over your life, what are some of the gifts that you've taken from those travels? Like the incredible relationships or opportunities that you never would have imagined or planned for yourself, but that just fell into place because you put yourself purposefully in the position to find, like you said, if you focus on the negative will be what you see in your life. But if you focus on adventure and opportunity, what have you garnered from putting yourself in that position, going to travel the world that you feel you would not have had, that you would have missed out on if you had not been ambitious about putting yourself in those situations?
Um, Lots of examples come to mind. So when I took my first solo trip, I was 17 as a part of a study abroad program to France for 6 months. And I didn't speak any French before I left. And I used to joke with my friends that I'm most comfortable outside of my comfort zone. And that experience put me so far outside of my comfort zone. It was years ago. So let's see, like 2005. And the program was really adamant about getting this immersive experience. And so they suggested only doing one phone call a month to your family and emailing maybe like once a week, just to really limit the amount of English and dive deep into the cultures. So, like, I attended a French high school and lived with a French family. And it was overwhelming and so challenging, but absolutely exhilarating. And there were many times, like, I mean, in the beginning, when you are learning a language, it's so hard because you can't participate in conversations and really get to know people. And luckily, I encountered a lot of kindness and patience from people. But there were several times where I realized, like, just how much I'm capable of that I wouldn't have known if I hadn't put myself in that position. And also that I, like, just because I'm alone doesn't mean that I'm lonely, and that there's
Mm.
a big difference between loneliness and solitude. And I just really enjoyed my own company. And it I from a young age, I knew I wanted to travel, like really, really young. I daydreamt about being an explorer and seeing all corners of the world. So that was already in me. It was like nature and nurture. And these experiences of really going outside of my comfort zone, just it woke me up and made me feel so alive. And I think that the more we can get outside of our comfort zone, the the more fullness of life we can experience. I think that's a key component.
Wow, what a formative experience. And to highlight, I don't know your feelings now as a mother. For me, I also did study abroad and it was such an incredible experience. I was at NYU and I participated in their study abroad program and I studied in Prague, the Czech Republic, which is now called Czechia. And it was an incredible experience. And I had a similar, I think it's that age of life as well, a similar experience of, at home, you're surrounded by your family, and then you go to college and you're surrounded by your roommates and your classmates. And going to a study abroad experience is often a more isolating experience because of new culture, new language, a bit more difficulty maybe with coursework because you're likely studying a new language and reading books and having to maybe be more conscious and aware of that experience than you would be back in the States if you're an American going to college after you've gotten into the swing of things. And I had a similar experience that you discussed about you are somewhat isolated, but you're not alone. you become comfortable with yourself as a person and sitting with your thoughts. And then when you're in more stillness, once you really embrace that comfort of just who you are and stopping leaning out and trying to almost assert your own thoughts on people or figure out what people want from you, right? That time of life when you're just trying to figure out, what do I want? What do people expect from me? When you're studying abroad, so much of the noise gets cut out and you can focus differently, and you have different opportunities to connect with people and different ways to think, see different cultures, and see the breadth of which you have choices in life and what you want to do with your life, where you want to live, how you want to live. And so I think it's extraordinary. And I actually ended up meeting my husband on my travel abroad experience. Now, we didn't get married then. We got married 20 years later, but he was my best friend since meeting in class then. And then as life evolved, we ended up getting married decades later. And so I personally had big gifts from that study abroad, that period of my life and my travels. But I think that everyone can take so much from a study abroad period.
Hmm. Yeah, 100%. I love stories like that where it's just it's the question of, is this coincidence or is this
Mm,
serendipity? And I think that the fact that you met your husband, uh, that's one of the key aspects of the traveler's mindset, is being open-hearted. And it's just, being willing to have that conversation with someone, or show up and say yes to an opportunity, whether or not it looks like an opportunity at the time, and just seeing how it completely changes the trajectory of your life. I have a friend who had a similar story, where she lived in France briefly as a nanny, and went out to a cafe, and she was in a small town, and she overheard some some girls about her age speaking in English. And she was sitting there and she's like, I should go say hi, but that's kind of weird, and like was kind of talking herself out of it, like, I don't even know these people and I just go say hi because they speak my language. That's strange. And she's like, they got up to leave and she was like, I'm just going to do it. So she went over there and introduced herself, formed a friendship, and they happened to all be from California. And as a result of becoming friends with these girls, she met her now husband and now has two kids with him, all because she was
mm.
open-hearted and introduced herself. And I love that. I feel like it's more likely when you travel. So when you can bring that back home, it makes life really exciting.
Absolutely. And it's interesting because sometimes when you do a transatlantic flight, you're not in the mood, so to speak, for a connection. Sometimes you're tired and you're like, okay, I got to get my 6 hours my 6 hours of sleep in because I've got a busy schedule the next day, right? But when you slow down and you're able to connect with the people around you, that's a really interesting opportunity as well as co-travelers on a transatlantic flight to meet people. And I've made such incredible connections. I have met people my daughter is a children's literature author, and I've met people and shared my daughter's story, and they became her just number one fans, right? Because we shared this really strong connection on this flight. And they became champions of the work she does for charities and the literature and for animals. And it's because of that, we just happened to be sitting next to each other on a transatlantic flight and formed this connection. So I absolutely believe in the power of the connections that we make in travel. And travel isn't just about the destination, just like everything else in life. It's about getting there, the journey, and the connections you make along the way. I wanted to talk to you because I know your travel experiences have evolved over your life, from solo travel, like when you were in college, and now to, then we're traveling with friends, family, and then with kids, and how all of those offer different aspects to that travel experience. And so I'd love to hear your reflections on the different experiences you have based on who you're traveling with, and how, as life evolves, you've learned to prioritize that so that you aren't missing out on those experiences, even as life changes, that you're still doing some solo travel, you're still traveling just with your kids or with your partner to have those special travel related connections.
Yeah. I love this question. So I've done pretty extensive solo travel, and then I started to travel. I met my husband about 20 years ago in college, and we had done a couple trips together. But throughout our relationship, I still regularly do solo trips or travel with one of my close friends, Amber, who's like my designated travel buddy. And I, it's funny because a lot of people have like I don't think it's meant to be like in a mean way, but people just express their comments like, "Oh, why wouldn't you just travel with your husband?" Like, and not understanding it and kind of judging me for it. That once I got in a relationship, I wouldn't just only travel with him. I'd still they saw it as a red flag that our relationship was in
Excuse me.
trouble. That I still went on, solo trips or trips with just a friend, and I just try to stay in my lane, and I don't have any
Mm.
proof. And um, I enjoy, they're all so different, whether you travel by yourself or with a friend or with your partner or with kids. Now I have a 1 year old and a 3 year old, and traveling with my kids was really important to me. That was a big decision factor before having kids is I really don't want to lose this part of me because it is such a big part of my identity and it's my greatest passion. And there were two things that helped sway that decision is a lot of people who told me like with good intention, oh, get it out of your system now because once you have kids you're not going to be able to. And what I realized is those people didn't travel before having kids, so why
Mm.
would they travel after? Like it wasn't on their they never traveled really, so it was just one of those phrases that was thrown around and constantly believed. And then the other thing I heard was that having kids is a reason to travel, not a reason to stop. And I heard that and I was like, that is a truth for me. It may not be for other people, but for me, it's a truth because I learned so much from my travels. And then since having kids, I we've gone to I think 5 or 6 countries now with them, and it's a different style of adventure. I'm not doing as many like rugged, off the beaten path things. I have different criteria. I want to make sure the country or the places that we're going to does have good medical care just in case and things like that. And we spend a lot more time at playgrounds and it's a slower pace, like mostly having a couple home base locations and then doing little like day trips or adventures. And it's nice though, like slowing down the pace a bit, because when I did solo travel, a lot of times it was like very long periods of time so that I could really integrate myself into the culture. And then with friend travel, it was kind of like this place, this place, this place, try and cram in as much as we can because we don't have much time. And with family travel, it's combination of the both. Like I'm able to slow it down, and I'd never visit a playground before having kids, but like it's an awesome opportunity to meet other parents and kind of see how they parent across the world, and this reinforcement that there's more than one right way to live a life and there's more than one right way to raise a child. And it ends up being very fun. The downside is like one of my favorite things I love to do when I travel is go to like a local cafe, get a coffee, like a cappuccino, and write in my journal and just observe everything around me, life going on around me. I love that. And on my most recent trip with both my boys, we were in Norway and Denmark, and my 3 year old is pretty darn chill. Like he's a really good traveler and just kind of goes with the flow. And my youngest is more of a typical toddler where he's like just this wild, active boy. And those cafe visits are stressful. Like chug this coffee before someone flips out and get him out. And what we decided to do is during nap time, my husband and I would just alternate who gets to go out and do some more adult exploring. And it works. It's different, but it works. And it's fun and it's super challenging. But I think, okay, so I know I'm talking a bit right here, but during that Norway trip, I had this moment a few days in. We were still a bit jet lagged and there was lots of meltdowns. And I was just like, oh gosh, like, am I ever going to be able to travel the way that I used to? Like, because right now this is more frustrating than joyful. And that was a weird experience for me for traveling. And I saw this email from the author Mark Manson, and it was talking about how there's a cost or a pain to nearly everything in life. And the question is, what activities or experiences or lifestyle shifts do you find that pain not to be so painful or worth it? And an example was like going to the gym. Some people find the pain of working your muscles and working cardio to just be horrible and not worth it. And other people start to enjoy that pain. And I read that on that trip and I was like, ah, I went into this thinking there wasn't going to be a pain or a cost associated, but there is. And for me, it's so worth it because now I'm back a couple months after. And yeah, I remember the hard times. Like my son went on a nursing strike and I was expressing in an airport toilet. That wasn't very glamorous. But then I have these moments of seeing the awe that they are experiencing. And I, as a result, am experiencing awe from their awe. And it's just incredible.
Mm. Oh, I love it. And it resonates so deeply with me on so many levels. The number of children's playgrounds I've been at around the world, because between the two of us, my husband and I, we have 4 young children
Oh, wow.
and they love going to the parks. And I can remember when I only had one, my first child many years ago. And, you know, coming from northern Michigan, which is where I'm based, um, there isn't a lot of diversity where we live. There's one language spoken, you know, that just is the nature of this region. And I always just absolutely adored when we could travel and she could hear other languages and meet people who didn't look like her, didn't sound like her, didn't dress like her. It wasn't this very homogeneous version of life that we have in our small town. And I always just absolutely loved that. And so did she. And when you talked about seeing the different parenting, I also think you learn so much about a culture from experiencing what happens on the playground. And you learn so much about what makes the fabric of a community. Because if I go to a playground in northern Michigan, I have a very different experience than if I go to a playground in San Diego, California. Right. And I'm meeting military families from around the world, and they are telling me the most amazing stories, and their kids speak all these languages and they've had all these life experiences, and it's really inspiring and cool. And if I am in Spain or if I am in Norway, it's a different experience. For example, in Norway, I don't know if you had this experience there, their playgrounds are so different. It's a different metric of safety
Mhm.
compared to what we're used to in the States. I mean, it's one of the things that I saw really commonly was these pillars, and they'd be, you know, 15 feet high, and they'd be going up, 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 no railings, nothing. And then maybe just like little bars that then they have to climb up to. And again, very high up, nothing to catch them under. And as a parent, especially when I only had my first child and I was a bit more cautious, you know, and I'm still cautious, but when I was probably even more cautious than I am now with 4, you're looking at that and thinking, "Oh my goodness, how do people keep their hearts from having heart attacks here when they take their kids to the playground?" But it was normal, and the kids navigated it very well. They were very independent. They were very, you know, strong and stable, had great balance, and that was the situation for them, and it was normal. And so it's so interesting. And in Denmark, there are interesting documentaries about how they often will have outdoor education and kids are left out in the buggies when they go to coffee and all sorts of different ways to raise children and have that child rearing experience. So it's really, really fascinating. And as you said, to try to, when you're feeling triggered and like, oh man, nothing's going the way that I want it to go, lean into, okay, is what's the bigger problem? What's happening or my expectations for what's supposed to be happening? What's the big issue? And what is amenable to my influence? Let's lean into that second part. What can I change to allow us to move forward in this moment?
Mm-hmm. And I feel like the number one answer to that is your attitude. Really.
Exactly. One of the things that I wanted to really lean into is the title of your book, and kind of the impact of that, which is the joys of jet lag. So, why did you specifically lean into joy and that feeling of jet lag? What does that mean to you, and what do you want it to evoke in readers?
I'm hoping that people see that it's all about seeking out the good or the gift in the harder situations in life and in travel, because it's always available. Sometimes it's harder to find, but you just have to really have the intention to seek it out, and then you will find it. And I mean, we know that jet lag is inevitable on long flights, and challenges and difficulties are inevitable in life. So if we know that in life, that so much of it is made up of challenging moments, pain, suffering, frustration, um, even mundane, boring moments of have to do things, like our to-do lists are endless. And I think so many of us are experiencing burnout right now with how many responsibilities we have, and all of the daily dramas that make up our lives. And I find that I used to try to rush through those moments, to get to the good stuff, to get past
Mm,
the have tos so I could get to the want tos.
mm,
And I've been more aware of this since having kids. You know, there's so much on my husband's and my plate that we have to take care of. And so in the past, and I still do this on occasion, try to rush through it. And an
mm,
example is like I I had to I had to wash the duvet cover and put it on my bed because my youngest son threw up when I was sitting there with him, and it got all over like my Kindle and my phone and everything. And I hate changing the duvet cover and putting the little buttons on and tying it. Like, it's just a task that I can't stand. Like, and so I held off, and then one day I was like, okay, enough is enough. I need to put this thing on the bed. And my boys were in the bedroom playing, and normally I would rush through that task because I just don't enjoy it. And I was like, I feel like it's good intention. Rush through this
mm,
boring, mundane task I don't enjoy so that I can hang out with my boys and do something fun that I want to. But I paused and really felt, the button and the fabric coming together and putting the duvet cover in. I didn't rush it. I listened to my boys playing. I kind of activated my five senses as I was doing this task. And then I went, sat on the floor and started playing with them. So it took a bit longer, not too much longer, but it felt really good because I realized that the majority of life is made up of these moments, these have to mundane moments, these painful, difficult moments. It's the majority of life. And if we try to rush through that to get to the quote unquote good stuff, we're rushing through the majority of our life, not being present in it, not seeking out the joy and the jet lag, not experiencing it with our five senses activated, total presence, and just being in the moment instead of having our minds wandering or trying to multitask and be productive so that we can get to the good stuff. Otherwise, before we know it, we'll have rushed through all of our life. And I I don't know, maybe I'm a glutton for punishment, but I want to feel it all. I don't want to just feel the good, the comfortable. I want to feel the challenges. I want to feel the painful, even the mundane, because that's what life is.
I love that story. And I have to share one of my children's favorite activities. I also do not love changing the sheets and folding laundry. It's not on my fun list. But one, when you put it off, it grows, right?
Yeah.
Literally it grows, but also the relationship you have to it, the negativity grows. And so leaning into it and getting it done is actually makes it less of a big deal than when you let it fester. But we all have the propensity from time to time to do that. That's just human nature. But one thing, as much as I don't love changing the sheets and especially the fitted sheets, why do they have to be that way? But when you're doing it, it's funny because when we have young kids, sometimes we're like, okay, I need to do this when they're napping. I need to do this when they're sleeping or when they're playing because it will be so much faster if I do it by myself. But actually, when we bring them into that activity, just like when we bring them into travel, yes, it will take longer. Yes, there will be different things we need to cope with along the way, different challenges. But when we include them, it's fun for them, it's fun for us, and it changes the dynamic of that activity. So for me, changing the bed sheets is one of the kids' most favorite things because it means that once we get that fitted sheet on, which is, the hurdle we need to jump over even more than the duvet buttons, which I totally agree with you. They're no fun. But once we get that fitted sheet on the bed, that means they get to lay down and we get to play with the bed sheet.
Yeah.
And then we get to when we do the duvet cover, right? Because you got to like flip it up and stuff it, right? There are all these games and fun moments that we can have doing the work rather than, well, we've got to wait to have fun because I have to do this work. We can all have fun and connect when we're doing the work. And while some people look at the journey of traveling as the work, actually, that can be a fun part too, because my kids think I'm Superwoman when we travel because there's always a problem and we always fix it. And they see, like, okay, let's see how fast mom can fix this. And mom knows where to find the agents and she knows who to talk to. And so they actually find those challenges kind of fun because we travel enough that it's a bit of a game. Um, and when we include them, you made me think of this earlier. So my daughter had a book tour this last fall for her third book, Wolf Tales, and it was a big deal. It was a national book tour. And there were times where we would hit a different city in less than 24 hours. We'd have less than 24 hours to travel, get to the new place. She'd have a morning show. Maybe she'd have an afternoon show. Maybe we'd be visiting a shelter because her fourth book is about animal shelters. So she'd be visiting a shelter, donating to them, promoting them. So it was really, really busy time. And it was not only my 10-year-old daughter at the time who was the author, but my 4-year-old son who has a really tricky time with transitions. And in daily life, we really have to be really purposeful about how much time we have to get from one activity to another so that we can really set him up for success and set the family up for success and for it being as smooth as possible. And yet here we were on this national book tour where, okay, we're in Washington, D.C. one day, and then we're going to be in Boston, and then we're going to be in Detroit. And, and you're just going from place to place to place. Or, okay, we're in Los Angeles, but we've got 2 hours before our plane leaves. And by the way, there's a big fire. And, there are these challenges that come up when you're traveling with kids that are predictable and unpredictable. But the interesting thing looking back on that, and I think a lot of parents might say, gosh, why did you drag your poor little kid around for this? Right? Like, gosh, that sounds really hectic and stressful. He loved it. He got to eat a lot of pizza, which made him very happy. And what he remembers from this time was there was one trip that we did not bring him with us. It was to New York City. It was a very quick trip, and he stayed with his dad. He, to this day, when we talk about how much fun it was to go on this book tour, he's like, but you didn't take me to New York with you, Mom, and that's not happening again. You are not leaving me behind again. So while I was so worried about, is this going to be stressful for him? It was actually a really fun time for him, and he has only good memories. And the stress that we maybe encountered along the way was probably related, like we said earlier, to my expectations and my own anxieties about how is this going to go. And when I learned to let go and just go with the flow and just kind of stay on the waves of life rather than get sucked down into the depths of the water, that's when we were successful as a family. And it was just such a great experience for us.
Mhm. Yeah, that's
Very cool.
incredible. What an amazing experience for them. Although missing out on New York City, like pizza capital. Ooh.
He will never let me forget it. And his favorite movie since being a young child is Home Alone. And there's the Home Alone in New York City. And so he has this really magical view of New York City. So he just can't believe that he missed out on that. But there's always another trip, and we'll be certain to include him next time. We won't get away with that again, that's for
Yeah.
sure. We won't. Oh, I love that. Do you have tips? You mentioned jet lag and that it's, somewhat inevitable with travel, but along your journeys, have you come up with any strategies to help you to navigate that so that it's easier to get into a routine with sleep and eating schedules and so forth?
A lot of the common advice that you see all over the place is, on the flights, drink lots of water, and with with the kids, like we've done, let's see, the big time difference trips was Norway, Denmark, Chile, and just knowing the bookends of those big trips are hard. The travel day, the day after, expect them to suck. Expect middle of the night wake ups, minimal sleep. Um, just expect it. And then know that it's just about 2 3 days on either end of the trip. When we did those, it was like I woke up in the middle of the night and played for a while, and then after a couple hours I fell asleep. And you can, I mean, if you're traveling with your partner, you can like alternate to try to catch up on sleep, but it's gonna happen. And know that the stuff that's in the middle makes it all so worth it. And then I think just kind of like with kid travel and jet lag, is you just gotta follow their lead, let go of the routines. They can get back on track when they get back home. And you just gotta be in full adaptation mode, and that makes it so much easier.
I love it. Do you have any other tips or hints about travel that you have from the book or from ongoing endeavors you have that you want to share with our audience today as we're wrapping up the episode?
Um, I think just try to go into trips with fresh eyes and just actively seeking out these opportunities for adventure. Um, Being open to having conversations with strangers. Like at home, I've always struggled with shyness and I hate small talk. And maybe that's why it's easier for me to be like this effortlessly outgoing person on my travels, is because it's such a brief amount of time that you're going to be abroad that you got to dive deep quickly. And I'm just like so curious about how other people are living and what their lives are like, that I'm able to bypass that small talk and awkwardness and just get right in deep and find out more. And if you can do that, like it really adds a lot of depth and authenticity to travel that make really, really memorable experiences. I'll share one more story of where I did this and it just made the trip. I was traveling a couple years ago to Myanmar, and I stayed on Inle Lake, which has this village of like floating houses. And to get there, you had to take this small little boat. And then on my last day, the boat driver picked us up, and he had his wife and young son on board. And even though they didn't speak English and we didn't speak Burmese, they invited us to have lunch at their house before dropping us off. And it worked with our schedule. Like we had some extra time and we're like, sure, let's do this. And we show up, and their house was like this 2 room shack resting on stilts right above the water, very modest. And we get in, and the wife runs to the kitchen and starts cooking. And we all sit on the floor and they served this feast of like 10 different plates of food and a roll of toilet paper to use as napkins. And you would think that it'd be awkward, no one being able to speak the other's language, like just minus a couple of words. It was like very minimal. But like laughter and smiles, it's universal. And so with lots of gestures and making mistakes and like probably translating things really wrong, it ended up being this incredible, memorable part of my trip, one of the highlights of it, really. And it all came about with like, yeah, going into a situation and being like, I don't know how this is going to turn out. My gut says I'm safe. Check in with your gut before you are open hearted with a stranger, of course, but just go with the flow and see how it turns out. If it doesn't turn out good, it's a good story. If it does turn out good, it's a great story.
Do you have any tips when you're talking about, being in a new country, navigating small talk and actually bypassing it and getting to the things you really want to communicate, the questions you really want to ask? Do you have any go-to questions that you ask when you're in a new place, meeting people from that area to help you really jumpstart the connection with that place and the people?
I've noticed that a lot of times people start off asking me, like, especially like solo trips, they ask me, like, oh, husband, kids, what's going on? And like now it's like, yes, yeah, like still solo trip, and a lot of times they're confused that I'd be traveling by myself or not. But I always flip the question back to them and opening it up to where they're from, family, married, kids, where they were raised, their favorite food places in town. It's kind of a choose your own adventure of where that conversation can go. But asking where someone's from, if they aren't from there, why'd they move? What was life like? A lot of times you find like these like uh you find out that these people moved from horrendous suffering and it was a better opportunity. And a lot of times they're willing to talk about it. And if you're curious and listening to learn instead of listening to agree or disagree, the conversation can go very far very quickly.
Wow, that's so true. And Kat, what is coming up next for you? What is the next adventure that you are preparing for?
Two adventures. In May, I'll be going to Vancouver Island with my family. I've been to Canada a few times, but never there. And after returning from the Norway trip, I was like, I need to change my criteria a bit where it's not going to be a super long flight, minimal time change, epic nature, you know, we'll head there. And the other adventure is I'm switching genres and I'm actually in the process of writing my first children's book and it should be out in June. And it's called Grumple the Great. And it's a tale of kindness about a black bear based here in South Lake Tahoe.
Oh, that is so exciting. I can't wait to see it and talk about it once it's available and share it with our listeners. That's right. I am a big advocate for children's literature. I actually have a children's literature focused publishing house, Little House of Dreams Publishing, and have my book, The Boy and His Brightly Colored Blocks, coming out in May. So we
Oh,
will be
exciting.
promoting our books at the same time and we will be seeing each other on the road, I'm sure, promoting books. So it's a wonderful small community of kidlit authors, and I'm so excited that you're joining the community because it's an amazing one to be a part of. So
Oh,
that's wonderful.
congratulations. That's so exciting.
Thank you and congratulations to you as well. Where can listeners connect with you and learn more about your book, The Joys of Jet Lag, and the upcoming book?
Um, my website, catmedina.com, and it's cat with a K. All of the information's there. I also have like a free once a month newsletter that gives you just 5 simple tips for seeking out joy in daily life. And also Instagram, Cat Medina Writer. Those are the two best places.
Excellent. And we will have that information in the show notes as well. So if you're driving or listening while you're doing chores, don't worry. It'll all be there on the website so that you can get it and learn more about Kat and how to get her books and just infuse more joy into your life and live with a traveler's mindset no matter where you are. Kat, thank you so much for being on the show. It's been a pleasure to speak with you today.
Thank you. That was a lot of fun.
And thank you so much, storytellers, for being here. Make sure you subscribe to the show so you don't miss any of our inspiring guest episodes like the one we had here today and our mindset focused, neuroscience informed short talks every Thursday. Until next time, stay safe and take care. I'll talk to you soon.